Shabbat Shalom. As a conservative rabbi, I think that I am uniquely positioned to hear complaints from all types of Jews. It's one of the advantages of being a conservative rabbi. It's also one of the pitfalls. I will sometimes hear from people that complain that Judaism is too strict, and other people complain that modern Judaism is too lenient. In particular, on the topic of the status of women in Judaism. Of course, over the last 100 years, there have been many complaints about the perceived role of women within Judaism. And to be honest, there are some legitimate grounds for at least raising the issue. As I talked about in my recent series on women in halakha, in Jewish law, women were, in the ancient world and up until the modern times, severely curtailed in many of their presence and ability and legal rights under the Jewish legal system. Women could not inherit directly from their husbands. They could not inherit directly from their fathers. Property was passed in a patrilineal way, and this meant that the women were often excluded. This necessitated, of course, the creation of the ketubah, a document which could secure a woman's rights to some sustenance in the case of divorce or death. And in the case of divorce, women too were unable to initiate the divorce procedure with the same equality as the men could. A woman could appeal to the Beit Din, the court, under certain circumstances to ask them to convince the husband to allow her to be divorced, but ultimately the husband could initiate on his own volition for whatever reasons he felt. Women were also not considered to be equally bound by the mitzvot during the ancient and pre-modern times. And this, of course, creates a perception that somehow a woman's performance of the mitzvot may be less valued in the eyes of our faith or tradition. But despite all of these topics that require additional study and investigation, it would be glib to say that Judaism does not respect or treat women with great honor and dignity. Somebody that is paying enough attention to come across these various points of potential criticism should also be paying enough attention to recognize that women are not ignored throughout our faith. In fact, women are often held up in great esteem. It is from Hannah, the mother of the prophet Samuel, that we learn how to pray. She is used as the template, as the archetype for what a prayer should be like. It is from our matriarchs that we learn the great lessons of how to maneuver a family, to negotiate the various tensions that take place. And more strikingly, in Pekudei Rabbi Eliezer, one of our great collections of rabbinic teachings, we are told that at the time of the giving of the Torah at Har Sinai, that far from it being a denigration of women, that men and women were separate prior to the giving of the Torah, it was in order that God could approach the women first and offer them the Torah. That God approached the women and said, "Will you accept the Torah?" And the women, of course, enthusiastically and willingly agreed to. We know as well from Midrashim that women also did not participate in the building of the golden calf. So it is not surprising that they had such a strong commitment to faith. But our tradition asks, in its inimitable way, but why did God start with the women? After all, if you have one group and two groups, the question is always going to be, why did you pick one before the other? And the answer that is given in Pekudei Rabbi Eliezer, which I will remind you is more than 1,000 years old, was that because, of course, God would go to the women first, because it is known that it is the way of the world that men will follow the opinion of women. That God had to sell the Torah first to the women in order to make sure that the men would be on board as well. Now, you can insert any snarky comment, any scornful or derisive statement about a henpecked husband, about men always doing what the woman says, happy wife, happy life, and that has become the butt of so many jokes in the modern world. But the teaching here is not meant to be taken as facetious. It is not meant to be taken as an insult. For the man to follow the woman's opinion was not a sign of weakness, it was a sign of strength and a sign of respect and devotion. You see, For a man to accept the opinion of a woman showed that he was strong enough, secure enough in his own understanding of himself to be able to know whether her opinion indeed was valid or invalid. If she were to say, no, I think let's go jump off a cliff, the man would have to know that that was probably not the right thing to do. But a man that is truly strong and confident in his own understanding and his own sense of right and wrong is not afraid to hear the opinion of his wife. Additionally, there is a good chance that her opinion may provide an insight that he is sorely lacking. You see, there is the great pitfall of being one of the dominant members of a particular society. In this particular case, men were certainly privileged in many ways, and as such, they were often blind to certain aspects of life, society, choices, and other things that the women, from their perspective, might have a deeper understanding of. We see throughout the Tanakh that when there is an issue, it is usually the woman that is able to give the solid advice. Abraham has to listen to Sarah. Isaac listens to Rivka. Jacob does as Leah and Rachel say. Time and time again, the woman provides an important insight and grounding and instruction to the male member of the narrative, because she is speaking from a position where she is only reliant upon her wits and her understanding. She has no power upon which to rely. She has no position or status within society with which to impose her will. All she has is her heart, her faith, and her wisdom. And ultimately, ideas that are grounded in those three things are going to be more enduring than ideas or positions that are grounded on power. Thankfully, in the 20th and now 21st century, women have been elevated to a status that is more equal to men. We still have a little work left to do, but by and large, things have been brought into a balance as it should be. But that means that we also have to make sure that we are being attentive to others, perhaps, that occupy that position of vulnerability or powerlessness, and be sure to hear their opinions as well. For they speak now in the position that women spoke from for thousands of years. Being vulnerable, they are left only with their sense, their wisdom, their heart, their faith. And as such, their advice and opinions become ever more valuable to all of us. Have the strength to hear from those that do not have the strength to impose. There are lessons that can only be found in those places. Shabbat Shalom.